All right, everyone ready to get started?
Yay.
Hope everyone had a good morning. Our first speaker is our, I'm sorry. Our first speaker is actually our awesome host, Julie Galloway. Thank you again. Last night was lots of fun and really looking forward to the aquarium. Thank you. Please.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys had a wonderful dinner last night, and hopefully everything went well with mom's night out. My wife got home at midnight, so I think you guys had some fun. Or she went out and had a couple more drinks afterwards. Who knows? So today we're going to have a quick presentation. Sherry's going to give the executive overview of the organization for the year, and then we have two presenters after that. A little bit of housekeeping. The bathrooms are right over here behind. So you go out that door, there's boys and girls rooms over there. And then drinks are here, snacks are in the back. If you need any more, we have more in the fridge. And then about noonish, we're going to start setting up food in this room. So all the kids and everybody's going to come to this room for lunch. And then after that, we will be going to the aquarium. We are going to have the bus come up here. If we're on ride the bus, it's going to be picking us up right outside of here. If you're driving, let us know. We have the tickets. So if you do decide to drive by yourself, see me or Tegan has it right now. We can give you your tickets, so you don't need to wait for us at the door. You can go on in by yourself, and then you can do a self-guided tour. There's nobody kind of walking you through. It takes about 2.5 hours, 3 hours to do the whole aquarium. And then we'll come back here. We'll have dinner here in this room again, and then we're doing Dad's Hideout. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sherry now. To Tom. Tom, you need to say anything? Okay. Here's Tom Cox.
Welcome everybody. We are glad you're here. This year is the first time we've had the occasion to have a board meeting in person in 4 years. Now, some of that was disrupted due to COVID, but it was great to be together. And we've got some things that we'll be sharing with you a little bit later today. And just a reminder that the CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia team, research team is here. And so you can spit for science, great expectorations, as I like to say, or perhaps my favorite, salivate, good times, come on. So we want to make sure that you see our researchers during your time here. So we'll share some more tidbits from our board meeting later on in the day.
Thanks, Tom. I'm gonna need John for a second.
I just have to
We're just trying to fix the camera. Good morning, everyone. This is pretty exciting. This is our first in-person WAGR weekend since 2019 when we were in Utah. And it's also our first hybrid event ever where we have in-person and virtual attendees. And our third event where we're connecting our families around the world via Zoom. So today we have families in 18 countries from the IWSA, and we're interpreting in Russian and Spanish, and Italian translation will be available after the conference.
This year we mailed conference packages to 74 IWSA families, and we have more than 100 people logged on to watch the Zoom. Our host for the third year, John, provided this map that shows where our registrants are today. Before I present the update for the organization, we'd like to thank our host family, the Galloways. We've got Troy and Tegan and Phoebe and Graham and baby Isaac. And we'd also like to thank their community of supporters, volunteers, and donors. We also would like to thank Linda Van de Sandy, who is here from Belgium. She coordinated the European and Russian packages. And Galina Guinea from Anna Russia handled all the packages from their Russian speakers. Michelle Colton took care of the packages in the UK, and I mailed the remainder 74 that went to other families. So we'd like to introduce the IWSA Board of Directors. We have Kelly here in the front. Their responsibilities include financial management, strategic planning, abiding by the rules and laws that govern U.S. nonprofit organizations. Kelly is currently our board chair and director of research and medical advocacy. John, who's running the meeting today, serves as the board secretary, and in January, he'll be our new board chair. Completing the current board team is Nikki Hoffman, who serves as our treasurer and oversees everything financial. Tom, who just spoke here, is also a board member, and he's joined by our European representative, Linda
Sandy. And we're really excited that Linda is here in Georgia with us attending WAGR weekend for the first time.
So just a little bit
of background here. 5 years ago,
small group
of IWSA volunteers and board members gathered for a leaders retreat. And the results of this meeting included the updated mission for the IWSA,
a new logo, a strategic plan, a couple of new board members, and hiring the first ever employee, me, as the part-time executive director. And this year will be the end of the fifth year. So the three basic components of the IWSA mission are awareness, research, and support. Almost everything we do falls into one of these categories, and many programs crossover. So sharing our activities and successes with our donors and supporters, researchers, families, and friends is important, and we do this through a lot of social media communications and printed material. So we are now doing an annual report, which we call an impact report. The first one was designed by Beth Morris, and the template is serving for our future reports. Gives us an at-a-glance illustration of what we've done over the year. So our most recent report, of course, is for
2021, and you'll see it provides highlights for each mission component.
Our first one is awareness.
And that comes in many forms. Our website is probably the most effective tool that we have.
And most of the work that is done on our website is by our volunteer webmaster, Jenny Campbell. And Jenny's here with us today. So we continue to add content, and we encourage everyone to take a look at the information and share the resource with your families, friends, teachers, physicians, potential donors, anyone who might be interested in the organization. So just briefly, in 2021, we had 14,000 visits to the website, and the statistics show now over the past 12 months, we've had 15,000 visitors, 19,000
sessions.
So we're pretty pleased with that. Another awareness thing that we do is our WAGR Awareness Day on November 13th. In 2021, it was a big event, and it was spectacular. It exceeded all of our expectations. Jenny Gunkel and Linda Bandy Sandy basically with Beth and Catherine Cancel helped to make that happen. So we hope that our 2022 event is going to be successful, and we hope everyone here will participate and having information out in the coming months. So research, we have a lot to talk about. Research here, exciting things are happening related to WAGR syndrome, not just in the US, but also internationally. And Kelly's going to tell us about some of the projects later. And we'll also have Dr. Kalish as a speaker. So the first ever published guidelines on WAGR syndrome came out December of last year. And each family who is enrolled in the WAGR syndrome patient registry is participating in research. A key project involving the registry resulted in these guidelines. Dr. Kalish and Linda will be discussing those a little later. you have any questions about the registry, you can reach out to Kelly or Linda.
Or me.
Another
Another
aspect
aspect of
research for the IWSA involves Aniridian North America. And because almost every individual who has WAGR syndrome
also has aniridia.
so by the IWSA
Helping to create this new
nonprofit in Aniridian North America, we're helping to have things focused on aniridia and WAGR.
WAGR syndrome.
So we're participating in
Conversations and
planning
planning research in patient care.
This organization is similar to the
Aniridia Europe.
set up as an umbrella organization to represent patients, researchers, and clinicians in the U.S. Kelly and I currently serve as board members, and we help to create the framework of the strategic plan. And today, we're really happy to welcome Dr. Jim Lauderdale from the University of Georgia. He's also a board member of Aniridian North America, lab at UGA. Is interested in studying radiation at 16, among other things. So, welcome, Jim. We're happy to have you. Supporting families of individuals with WAGR syndrome has always been a top priority for the IWSA. Last year, we welcomed 14 new families to the group. Each one of them received our new welcome package. We manage and moderate the private Facebook group. Last year, we had 298 members. And also hosting one weekend, especially in this virtual format, allows families around the world to join meetings and feel connected to our unique community. So, further connecting families, we have 181 people from 29 countries, last year, and we sent 149 packages to IWSA families. We shared a lot of those photos, and it was apparent how much
they appreciated receiving the packages and being part of the event.
And during the board meeting yesterday, we discussed that moving forward, that will be a priority to have a virtual component to WAGR Weekend. So the last part, which isn't actually part of the mission, but it's very important, are the operations of the organization. The board is responsible for managing all of the resources and the financial help that has to do with where the money comes from and how it's spent. This slide here shows that income in 2021 in US dollars was 88,000 and expenses were 55. So
income at 88,000.
You see the top line, the largest part came from our regular Wednesday. We are hoping to repeat that again in 2022. So last year, the IWSA's income came from a number of sources in addition to WAGR Awareness Day. We have private foundations, including the Saul and Teresa Esmond Foundation out of Florida, WAGR Warriors, the family foundation created by the Bronco family, and a U.S. government program related to COVID. Donations were also made to the Marshall Research Fund in memory of my daughter,
and
those funds were earmarked
for research related to Wilms tumor.
We have family fundraising and special events, like Facebook and Instagram fundraisers. And at the end of last year, we had an incredibly generous anonymous donor who gifted the organization $10,000 in honor of a loved one in her family. So we thought that was amazing. All of our donors are special, and we appreciate every dollar donated to the IWSA to help us pursue our mission and have events like this. So how we spend our money is broken down by mission component. So in addition to the website, some WAGR Weekend and travel costs,
other activities
are involved
with increasing awareness.
We have research-related expenses that include travel, conference and meeting costs to make presentations, to meet with researchers, and to
And to
discuss
discuss future and ongoing projects.
Last
Year, we traveled to Charlottesville, Virginia for the Iridia Conference,
to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania,
to
to Children's
Children's
Hospital,
Hospital,
to
to
meet
meet
with,
with
the
the lab team,
and to New York City, where we met with researchers who are working on Glome's tumor. Support involves our families.
families, sending welcome packages to the
Families
families.
is a top priority, and we have Chantal in the Netherlands who takes care of the packages in Europe and in Doha in Japan. WAGR weekend events in the conference gift boxes are also part of support. And operations here include all the things it takes to run a nonprofit, like compensation for
My part-time position, website,
member and donor management systems, insurances, taxes, permits, all kinds of other
overhead items that the board manages.
So
So as you see, there are a lot of things that go into running the
organization,
organization
and then we're grateful for everyone who
supports the work that we're doing.
So I just
I would like to quickly thank John Morris
for all the work that he's put into the virtual part of our presentation and connecting our families around the world, and to the presenters who will come after me. All the researchers who are interested in WAGR syndrome and working on projects, other organizations and patient groups, our board members,
our volunteers, and most of all, our families.
So he's going to speak next in during the day. If anyone has any comments or questions or has an interest in volunteering, you can speak with me or me about it. Thank you very much.
Did you turn it on?
John's gonna turn the mic off because we have some echo.
So I'm gonna try and talk loud enough that you can all hear me. Can you hear me right now? A little bit more? Okay, great.
We're good.
So
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to talk to you today because we have some great stuff happening.
So
As Sherry mentioned, a part of the mission of the IWSA is to facilitate research.
research
Is what leads
the
to diagnosis
and good
and
medical
medical care. Oh, I should be, I have to be on camera, sorry. Research leads to good medical care and better, longer, healthier lives.
So
So research is one of our top priorities.
But before I
Tell you about the WAGR research projects that are going on right now, I want to show you how the IWSA facilitates research.
And this
This is really important because in terms of money, we have no money.
what that means is the
The IWSA is a very small organization.
WAGR is a very, very short.
short.
Research costs a lot more money than a small organization like ours
Ours
could
could
hope
hope
to
to
raise.
raise,
But does
but
that
does
mean
we give up?
Of
Of course not.
Our
Kids don't give up,
but
so we don't either.
We
We just have to be smart, creative, and determined.
It shows you pick your speakers up.
The
The good news is it actually takes a lot more than just money to get research done. And the good news is the IWSA can do all of those things. First, research requires data. That's why the IWSA created the WAGR patient registry. Patients are also really important, not only because researchers need to study them, but also because patients and their families are the experts in this disorder. We are innovators. WAGR parents survive by being creative problem solvers. So we can help researchers when they hit a snag, find a solution. Collaboration is also a huge part of what we do. We believe in research that is patient-centered. And what that means is that patients are involved, patient organization is involved in every aspect of the studies that we are involved in. Collaboration also means, collaboration also means that IWSA partners with researchers and also with other rare disease organizations, related disorders to WAGR, to create projects that benefit all of us. Funding support means almost everything but writing a check. It means writing letters of support for researchers, which are often required by grant applications, and they can make a big difference. It means helping researchers find sources of funding that they may not be aware of. Everything from big agencies that can give a lot of money to small organizations like WAGR Warriors, which is a small foundation that's run by Jenny and Adam Gunkel, and Miranda's Mission, which is a small foundation run by John and Beth Morris. These very small organizations don't have millions of dollars to give, but what they do have is small amounts of money that we call seed money. Seed money can help a project get started and then grow to where it is capable of receiving funding from much larger organizations. Finally, dissemination. It doesn't matter if a scientist discovers something life-saving or life-altering about WAGR if nobody knows about it. We have to get the information out to our doctors and to our families. So the IWSA fills that gap through our website, through social media, through presentations at conferences, journal articles, webinars, everything that we can think of to make sure that this information gets into the hands of the people who need it. So now we get into the IWSA's priorities for research. As we all know, WAGR is more than just W, A, G, and R. Literally dozens of other conditions are also possible. If we tried to focus on all of them, we would not be very effective. So what we do is try to be strategic. We focus on aniridia because virtually all of our children have aniridia. We focus on Wilms tumor because 50% of our children will develop that. And finally, we focus on WAGR spectrum, on projects that focus on WAGR as a whole, that will lead to early diagnosis and improved treatment for all of the conditions that are associated with WAGR. Okay, finally, I'm going to tell you about the actual research projects that we're working on right now. The IWSA is currently involved with several projects for Wilms tumor. The first one I want to tell you about is going on at the University of Texas at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. Dr. Vicki Huff and her team have created a colony of mice who develop Wilms tumor at the same rate and in the same way that our children do. This is unique and new. And she is studying a medication that could serve to prevent Wilms tumor in our children. Think about that. So this is a mouse study, and it's also a great example of that seed money that I told you about a minute ago. WAGR Warriors is the group that provided the seed money for this project, got it off the ground, and 2 years later, they have a complete colony and they're receiving funding from other sources. Another Wilms tumor project that we're involved in will be taking place at a meeting this fall at the University of Michigan. This project involves a group called the Pediatric Surgical Oncology Research Collaborative. It is a group of surgeons, patients, and parents who are working on ways to improve the surgical treatment of solid tumors like Wilms. I am very proud to tell you that a handful of IWSA parents will be in this group, and we will be ensuring that children with WAGR, their needs and their concerns with Wilms tumor are represented in this international group to improve the treatment of Wilms in our children. As you may know, oh, wait a minute, I got ahead of myself. Aniridia research. This is a project by Dr. Peter Netland. Dr. Netland and his team at the University of Virginia are accessing the data in the WAGR patient registry. They are exploring glaucoma in WAGR. They're looking at whether there are differences between patients with WAGR and patients with just aniridia in terms of how often they develop glaucoma, at what age, how severe it is, how they respond to treatment. This is super exciting because we hope that this project will not only help children with WAGR, adults with WAGR, but actually all patients with aniridia. WAGR kids are helping to lead the way. As you may know, the 6th European Aniridia Conference was held just a month ago in Alicante, Spain. This conference brings together scientists, clinicians, patients, and aniridia organizations from all over Europe and in fact all over the world. This year, for the very first time, Aniridia Europe incorporated an entire session just on WAGR. The IWSA sent a team to this conference, including our executive director, Sherry Krantz, myself, John Morris, and Linda von de Sande. The session on WAGR spectrum at this conference included 4 presentations: Defining the WAGR Spectrum by Dr. Jen Kalish, who you'll be hearing from in just a bit. Lessons from the WAGR Patient Registry from me. A presentation on Wilms tumor in WAGR by Dr. Norbert Groff from the University of Saarland in Germany. And PAX6 mutations in the brain and endocrine system by Dr. Jim Lauderdale, who is sitting right back there. A scientist at the University of Georgia. Jim is not presenting this morning, but we're really delighted to have him here. And if you get a chance, say hello. This is a very busy slide with a lot of photos, but I wanted to give you an idea of what the IWSA accomplishes at a conference like this. In the middle, you see our little team. We actually met virtually for months before the conference, and then we met again in person while we were there. We wanted to plan how to accomplish as much as we possibly could at this conference. So in addition to giving presentations about WAGR, we also gave interviews for podcasts. We met with new WAGR families. We renewed relationships with scientists we've worked with before, and we created new relationships too. We met with the leaders of Aniridia Europe patient organizations, from a multitude of countries around Europe, and also with the leaders and scientists of the umbrella organization Aniridia Europe. I think that the most remarkable thing that happened at this conference is that now, more than ever before, there is a global sense that aniridia and its related disorders are a global community. This has enormous implications for research, for pushing the research further and faster. Moving on to WAGR Spectrum. Last year, the IWSA actually did some research of our own. Jenny Gunkel, Sherry Krantz, Linda von de Sande, and myself, we studied the factors that influence whether parents decide to enroll their child in the patient registry. This is a really hot topic among lots of different rare disorder organizations. So there was a lot of interest in what we were doing. So we created a poster presentation. That poster is actually right over there. And there are some copies of the text of the poster. So if you're interested, take a look and grab a copy of the text. This poster was presented at NORD, the North American Organization for Rare Disorders, at their conference last fall. Finally, our shining star research of this past year. I am not going to talk about this particular study. I'm going to let Dr. Kalish tell the story. I'll just tell you this. Hold on to your seats. It's incredible what has already been accomplished, and the best is yet to come. And then I just want to say thank you to every IWSA family, every IWSA supporter. If you have contributed your time, your talents, fundraising, if you've shared your child's data in the patient registry, you have made your child's future brighter. You've made the future brighter for all of our children, and I thank you.
I have a question on here. I'm going to keep myself muted, so if you can repeat the question for the
Okay.
virtual folks. But Heather Kessler from Florida was asking for the ongoing research. Can we do virtual fundraisers, and how can we get it linked to this research specifically?
That is an excellent question. Thank you, Heather. So virtual fundraising, we have lots of ideas. There are ideas on the website, and there are ideas that you can just contact us. We're happy to do a phone call or a Zoom to talk about ideas. And linking it to the research, there are also ways to do that. And we would be delighted to talk to you about ways to do that. So just contact us. Absolutely. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jennifer Kalish. Dr. Kalish is a clinical geneticist and scientist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Her clinical work and research focus on understanding the genetic mechanisms that predispose to cancer. This includes caring for children and adults with genetic diseases and studying these same diseases in the laboratory. As we've mentioned multiple times, Dr. Kalish is here. She's going to be presenting from the hotel, but she also brought a whole team with her. And Bill Durst and Andrew, forgive me your last name. Andrew George are here with us, and they are just terrific resources. If you have questions about the research that Jennifer Kalish is going to talk to you about, please talk with them. Dr. Kalish will be back at the hotel and available to talk with anyone, and she'll be very happy to do so.
Thank you. Can you switch the screen sharing, John?
We're going to be bringing her in from the hotel, so I'm going to play with the mic to try and make this work
work well.
And John, I think you have to, there you go.
Hey, Dr. Kalish,
Hi,
are you muted?
I don't think so.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? I am not muted.
Okay, hold on one sec, Dr. Kalish.
Can you see my screen?
1 second.
On the corner of the screen there for just a second, you saw.
It sounds like the online folks can hear me.
Member of Dr. Kalish's team, India. She is a college senior.
Dr. Kalish, speak now.
Can you hear me now?
There's an explanation of who everybody on the top team is.
The online folks.
I'm not hearing you. Yeah, no, I'm just, I'm trying to jump it off of the. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to turn off. I was able to do it, yes. We have it.
Way back when.
What do you have?
You know that even when we didn't have all this technology, we always had.
I don't know if that's audio.
I want to say hello to everybody around the world who's joining us. It's amazing that you're all online in all the different time zones.
See if that'll work.
You know, WAGR weekend started.
Dr. Kalish, can you give us a test?
Can you hear me now?
Started with 7 families in the backyard. And all of this has grown out of that.
All right, I have it on the headphones.
Adds more.
Is that plugged into there?
We also, you know, from the very beginning, wanted families outside the US to be able to participate. That's what's happening. Cost, time, all of that. When technology works, it makes that happen. I know.
For the folks online, can you see the slides as well? Great, thank you.
And
The audio was coming through yesterday.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, fill in time here, admittedly. But I need to share at least with you, if not
Wait,
our
did Zoom close?
researchers. Heather Tessner, who asked that excellent question,
Let's go.
participating online and eager to be with us. And she's having some problems with the registry. So
Jen, can you speak again?
passing that
Yep.
information along.
Hear me now?
you have trouble with registry.
What about now?
Passed along.
Jen, can you
and
speak?
so
Yeah, can you hear me, John?
Sort of wanted this information to go out to all. Maybe
Jen?
we'll do it again.
Yeah, hi, John. Can you hear me?
On the live stream right now. But we'll tell you guys a couple of things. First of
I still
all,
can't
future
hear.
WAGR weekend.
You still can't hear me?
Present WAGR weekend. How about that?
There was.
How many of you, this is your
There's a
first
setting.
WAGR weekend ever in person?
Is there a microphone on the computer?
Just getting started. This
Try again,
morning,
Dr. Kayla.
but,
What about now? Can you hear me?
Having WAGR weekend.
What's going on?
As you know, the last 2 years, we had hoped to meet together in Philadelphia. with
What about now, John?
Morris family being our hosts, which they
Yeah,
were.
it's not even.
It was just all online. It was all virtual. But we want to share with you, the board wants you to know
I mean,
that
we
we
could
have
another-
plans for WAGR weekend
Who has the English feed?
2023 and
Yeah.
2024.
Everyone else.
No, I haven't started yet. Just waiting for the folks who are in Georgia to be able to hear us.
Because we believe in putting the
Oh,
I
it's 'cause
in
this is-
IWSA.
I mean, I
We're
can-
the international
We
WAGR
could have
Syndrome
the video go, have
Association.
a phone.
And we
like
have
that.
families all over Europe that
Maybe.
participate in our organization.
Dr. Kalish?
So we're
Yes, sir.
excited about
She knows
that.
she's gone.
And specifically,
She's leaving.
the
Dr.
executive
Kalish, can you
for
hear
next
me?
year will be,
Yeah, we can hear you.
I never remember the name.
We can hear you and the folks online can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Princess Max.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know why this is happening. I fixed it, you know, I was able to get this going yesterday.
It was fairly new. It was based
No,
on Looks a lot like familiar with St. Jude's.
Right.
Is there a way
That's what it
for them
should
to
be.
just live stream it back?
All right, try and speak again.
What about now? Can you hear me now, John?
So start station.
What's that?
Linda and Sherry
Oh.
and Kelly, they have relationships with people.
Ask John if he can, well, no, there's just.
I got you. Okay, let's just-
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You can hear me?
And researchers over there.
Okay.
Family.
Great.
We're excited about that opportunity.
Okay, so John, you can hear me?
Online, the virtual live stream, you might participate in that, or hey, you go for a European vacation.
Thank you for your patience, everybody. I think they almost got it.
I think we're close to being ready.
Yeah, I just need you to stop talking.
Tom, go spit for science again.
What's that?
I said Tom can spit for science again.
Say that one more time.
Was that Tom talking?
Yeah.
Tell him he can spit for science again.
You can spit for science again?
Okay, so you guys can hear me there, John?
Yeah, we're trying to turn you up a little bit.
Okay. Almost there.
Can you fix this?
We have picture. We have slides. We are almost.
All right, talk one more time, see whether.
Can you hear me now? Can you
Yes.
everybody hear me? All right.
Yeah, you might just have to speak closer to the mic, but that's might be about
Okay.
it.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you. It's so exciting to be here today. Sorry, now we're just trying to advance the slides. Okay, so I wanted to just start with a just brief story about how I got involved with WAGR syndrome, now spectrum. So about 5 years ago, I think it was in 2017, I was walking down the hall in the genetics clinic at CHOP, and the door opened and I got pulled into a room. And who was in the room? The Morris family. And one of the senior geneticists had stepped out and asked me to come in and talk to this patient family. So I got to meet the Morrises for the first time, and we talked about WAGR, we talked about chromosome 11, and that sort of was that for the time. And then shortly after that, John reached out again and wanted to talk about research, because one of the things that had come up is that I'm doing research on another syndrome that's related to Wilms tumor on chromosome 11 called Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome. So John and I started exchanging emails, and then John also reached out to the Orphan Disease Center at Penn, and that group reached back out to me saying, oh, we have this family who's interested with WAGR syndrome research. Who's the person to talk to? John, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. And at that point, they put John back in touch with me, and we realized we knew each other already, and we started talking about how we could potentially work together. And as we're thinking about this and talking about this, one of the things that was shared was that there was this amazing patient registry. And when you're thinking about how to improve the lives for any rare disease, and particularly for WAGR spectrum, you have to think about this patient registry. And a lot of these images you'll note from the WAGR syndrome website, and with permission, of course. But basically, when you think about a registry, it's sharing information about medical history. And then comes the data analysis piece, where researchers and scientists like myself analyze that information. And then we put that information in a way that's accessible to for physicians and for families to basically synthesize that and use that. And that can lead to new guidelines and to improving the lives for patients and their families. So here's the timeline for the WAGR patient registry. It was started in August of 2014, and patients and families were invited to share information through a group that basically collects all that information. The foundation put together a specialized questionnaire, and that information was all collected and stored. Now, in the fall of 2019, in conversation with the IWSA through John and Kelly and Sherry, we basically started working together to try and evaluate the records and the data from the registry that had been all patient entered. The final data was collected at the end of May of 2020. And then we started a data analysis and created what we've called the WAGR Discovery Cohort Database. In that, we basically analyzed and summarized the results. And then it was the summer of 2021 when we first submitted the paper for publication. At that point, the paper had to undergo peer review by other specialists and experts in the community. And given that WAGR is such a rare disease, it was actually a challenge to find reviewers for the article who felt they could analyze the data and synthesize and basically comment on the validity of what we were presenting. We then met several times with IWSA to formalize the guidelines, and then the article was published in December of 2021. So, and here's the article, and in addition to the authors on the article, several of whom you know, and also Kelly Duffy, Kelly Trout, Jenny Gunkel, Sherry Krantz, and John, there was also additional contributors from my team, both on the clinical and the research side, who basically helped support parts of the articles, whether it was making a figure or just synthesizing the information. And one of the reasons we brought in the entire team, some of whom Bill and Andrew are in the room today, was really to get a sense of how, not just for the article we're publishing, but how we're going to change our own clinical practice to accommodate and use the resources that we have in terms of other specialists to set up a WAGR syndrome clinic, and to use the model that we had from the other rare disease that we focus on, Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, to apply to children and families with WAGR spectrum. And that includes in our clinical team, a nurse practitioner, a genetic counselor, and on the research side, research coordinators and research assistants. And so what are the parts of the article? Well, any article that's written has an introduction that talks about what we knew before, and then the evidence from all of that, what's the goal for the current study, and then what did we actually do? How was the study performed? What were our materials and methods? What was the source of information? And what were the results? And finally, what did we conclude from all of this information? How did we develop these new care recommendations and information about WAGR spectrum? So the introduction was really what was known before. So WAGR was first described in 1964 when that was the first description, but the data collection for that started well before that in the 40s. The largest study prior to ours that was reported was 50-some patients in 2005, and there was a range that was presented then of non-classic findings, and there were some initial guidelines for children with WAGR, and there was considerations of how to manage the kidney risks in particular. But there was limited information overall for how to basically care for children with WAGR spectrum and adults with WAGR spectrum. So there was lots of questions and not enough answers. So our objectives for the study and the goals were really the questions that we wanted to answer. So just moving around the slide sort of from left to right, one of the questions was, what were the specific health issues and how common were they in WAGR syndrome? What were the categories and how could we determine what care guidelines we needed? And what were the phenotypic characteristics? What were the features that children and adults with WAGR syndrome or spectrum presented with, and what information is that telling us? And all of those things were things that were considered when the WAGR syndrome patient registry was put together, and which became the source of data for our study. So from the materials and methods, this basically describes what was actually done. And this includes the participants and the data collection. So both the registry itself, where patients and families entered their information, the questionnaire that was developed, and then the data analysis was really taking that information in the discovery cohort and basically creating a database and then doing descriptive statistics to see what was different and what was the same in different categories as we went through different organ systems. So basically, there's a lot on the slide, but it's just to show the back and forth that has to go on in order to do a project like this. So there was the initial questions that were developed for the WAGR syndrome patient registry by IWSA. There was the participants in the data collection, and the data collection itself occurred through this coordination of rare diseases at Sanford. And that's an online platform that supports the WAGR syndrome patient registry and a lot of other rare disease registries, and really helps with both enrollment and then determines if information can be shared and with whom. And for us to get the data in order to do this project, after we had conversations with IWSA, we had to create a data sharing agreement and explain to the CORDS registry why we wanted the data and what we were planning to do with that data. And all of these things, and each step in this process takes time, which is why when you saw that timeline earlier, the fact that data collection started in 2014, we got involved and started talking about this in 2017-18, but didn't actually get the data until 2019, is the way clinical research works, because things take time to both shift hands and then to analyze the data. And in our conversations with IWSA, as we had the data, it was really to figure out what their research priorities were, and to try and work together to figure out how that applies to patients with WAGR spectrum in the community, and what were the important messages that we want and themes that we wanted to look for within the data and then present. And then that basically turns into the data analysis, the results in the publication, and really using our skills in rare disease populations and our experience using with other syndromes, developing care recommendations, was how we moved forward with this. So what are the data that we had and how was it analyzed? So the data collected, and for those of you who have filled out some of these surveys, you actually had options and many choices for many, many different areas. And this is one example for in the kidney, renal, genitourinary sections, as for each of these conditions, did your child or did the patient information was being entered about have a problem currently? Did they have it in the past? Was it not a problem, or did you just not have that information? And basically for each of these healthcare issues, there were answer choices. And once we had that information, there was a study ID number that was assigned, and then we would get the answers in bulk for each of those study IDs and answer to each individual question. And there was hundreds of questions in this, as you know from filling it out. So there was so much information. And then we had to go through that data and figure out if the answer, basically put the answers together and put them into categories. So for all of the folks for this particular question, if it was currently a problem, to know how many it was currently a problem, how many it was a problem in the past, and how many it was never a problem. Next slide, please. Excuse me. And once that happened, that information is used to determine whether a child or an adult with WAGR spectrum is affected or not affected by a particular issue. Next slide. And once that we have that information, then we summarize the numbers for that particular question. So whether or not they're affected, not affected, there's no information, and how many participants answered that individual question. And then we can figure out the frequency of that particular problem or health issue for the cohort that we had. And we started out with 90 some patients. And as you can see, for some questions, there wasn't an answer. So we had to basically remove that information. Next slide, please. And just in terms of the terminology that we use in the article, there's the characterization of data, which means summarizing all the observations that were collected and basically describing the data to analyze. Then there's the characteristics or the feature of the quality that belongs to the individual or group of individuals. And then there's the phenotype, which is the features, traits, and characteristics of that individual. So what do you actually see in that patient? And basically, as we move across the different letters that make up WAGR, we wanted to look if whether or not there were Wilms tumors, if there were nephrogenic breasts, if there was none of the above. For the same thing for aniridia, and not just for aniridia, if there were other eye issues that were less well characterized within the WAGR spectrum. For GU anomalies, the same thing, whether there were, there weren't, if they were internal or external. And then for a range of developmental delays, if the delays were severe or less severe, or there were no issues. So as a result, we basically created the WAGR discovery cohort. We looked initially at the classic features and then the health issues across the cohort. And then we looked at all of the historical evidence. And think about it, at this point, we had 80 years of evidence of smaller reports looking at how the phenotype changed, or how at least our understanding of the phenotype changed. And that mean by phenotype, I mean the clinical features. And then particularly if there were things that were emerging as potential phenotypes, such as the gastrointestinal system, that we hadn't really considered in the past. And again, this is the importance of family and patient reported data is there's a lot of things that may not actually make it into medical records, but families are aware of. And it's so important that we as researchers have that information and partner with families to really understand not just what we think we know about a syndrome or a spectrum, but what is actually happening within the spectrum. Go back. So what is the discovery cohort? A cohort's a group of people that have a common characteristic. So that's a population or community that are the appropriate terms for this. A discovery cohort is the initial group with new information that can provide evidence to go back to the larger population and ask, oh, by the way, do you have this also? Is this feature something that your child or your adult with WAGR spectrum has that a doctor hasn't asked you about before? For the study population, it was participants within the WAGR syndrome patient registry. So what does the discovery cohort tell us? Well, we looked at the classic features and we saw there was a range of features in the WAGR patient registry. There was common issues in the population and there was individual medical issues. And that was a condition that was reported in at least one or a few patients with WAGR, but seemed to be less common. And what all of this helped us think about is we have what we know as WAGR, but it expands not just as the syndrome, but into a spectrum. And at the same time, we need to think about each patient and each individual as an individual because they need a tailored and focused medical plan for them that may include overlap with other patients, but it's really important that we make sure that all of the medical care and the suggestions that we have, both on the research side and from the clinical side, is optimizing everything that that patient needs. So as we're starting to characterize this, and this is just a color-coded version of this, you can see sort of the color schemes and color spectrums of the severity and the range that we see within each of these letter designations. And that's making us think about how to change this from just the syndrome to the spectrum. And you can see all the frequency of all the different features that are within the WAGR or the WAGR categories here. And there's a lot of data here, and a lot of this has been synthesized already on the IWSA website. You're welcome to read the whole paper, but the point of all of this is just to see the percentages of things affected. And Kelly mentioned before that 50% of children or adults with WAGR have Wilms tumor, and our data was supported here where we saw overall 54.5%. So, but when you break that down, there's nephrogenic rests and there's Wilms tumors. So they can be slightly different things that are part of this spectrum. And if you look at each of the individual categories, you can see something similar. Next slide. And as we're synthesizing all that information, and basically these pie charts are looking at all of the individual features that make up the letters. And you can see if you look at just the syndrome characterization, so based on the classically described syndrome, this is what the pie chart looks like on the left. However, if you think about the spectrum and expand what some of the features are, so for example, having all of the features based on a larger, including nephrogenic rest, not just Wilms tumor, including with aniridia, including other ocular issues, for genital urinary changes, including kidney in general and urologic abnormalities, and broadening the range of what's developmental delay or learning issues, you can see that the pie chart looks a bit different. And we feel by changing this and calling it a spectrum, we're able to encompass more features for each individual patient. And within these categories for each issue, there's a range of things that you're going to see. And you can see this is just for the genital urinary conditions. And by looking through all of this, there's things here that might have been reported in smaller numbers in previous cohorts that are becoming more apparent, or things that we need to consider more. And you can see that there's a huge range of what they can be. So, excuse me, as we're basically collapsing this data down for specifically looking at the genital urinary category, you can see there's lots of different things that are general, and there's some things that are sex specific. And we need to think about both of those aspects as we're considering one individual category of many categories. And thinking about the health issue by categories, when we brought all of these things together, we showed that there was a number of things that there was at least one issue that really fell outside of the classic letters that we see in WAGR. So when we're building comprehensive care plans for individuals, we need to think about things that are not just on that initial list. And when you ask a physician who is not all that familiar with WAGR and they look it up in a medical textbook, they're going to see the WAGR, but won't necessarily think about these other conditions that we need to consider as well. And finally, so what does the WAGR spectrum look like? Well, it looks like all of your children and adults who are here and around the world. And it's important as we're thinking about this that we want the healthcare teams to learn about the phenotypic spectrum and how to both recognize and diagnose WAGR, to help newly diagnosed families by sharing images like this one of patients within the community, and to help families of younger children understand how patients are going to develop over time and things to think about. So I'm going to conclude this part of the talk with the results now, and really want to thank the patients and families who participated in the research and the WAGR Syndrome Patient Registry, everyone who shared pictures. I'd like to thank the IWSA, Miranda's Mission, and the organizers, and all of you for listening to this part. And I'll get to the conclusions of the initial research and future directions in the next talk, but I think we'll pause now for questions if anyone has any. And I don't know if Sherry or John are going to field questions.
John is just a second. Can you hear me, Dr. Kalish?
I can hear you.
Okay. I think we have one in Spanish. We're still waiting for that.
For translation. Excellent.
That's not this. Yeah, that's something else. That's on the website. On here. Yes, so the question was actually about a different research study. We called it the Tooth Fairy study. It was a scientist in Memphis who was collecting baby teeth that had been lost and using the pulp inside the tooth to study brain problems. They were growing the cells from inside the teeth. That study is ongoing, and there's information on the website about how to do that. So it's really important to understand what the study is and how to collect the tooth. So if you have a child who's at the age where they are losing teeth, please go to the website, look for the Tooth Fairy study, and it'll give you all the information you need. Anything else? I think we can move on. Oh, wait. That's an excellent question, Carol. This is an ongoing study, and Dr. Kalish is going to talk about that next. Perfect.
Yep.
You back?
Sherry, what was the question?
So we're actually going to take a break now.
You are. Okay, excellent.
Yes. So
And then we'll come back and Jen will present.
And we'll keep going.
Care management model.
Excellent. Okay. So how long are we taking a break for, Troy?
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
You're all doing great.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, Jen, we lost you. Is that okay?
She's probably taking a break.
I'm here still.
Okay, you good
10
for a
minutes.
10-minute break?
Yeah, sure. Just let us know when you want us to start.
All right, thanks,
Thank
Jen.
you.
Thanks, Jen.
And everyone else who's with us virtually, again, 10-minute break. So it is 10:25. We will restart roughly at 10:35. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Kalish, we're ready when you are. Oh, beautiful, you're there.
All right, we're here. Everybody can hear me locally.
Yeah, is
And
everybody ready? All right, Dr. Kalish, you have the room.
excellent. So I want to talk about what's next. So as we sort of ended the last talk, I want to talk about the conclusions and future directions. So, just hit that, sorry, technical issues. Just, no. Okay. So what is the WAGR spectrum and how do we improve care for patients with WAGR spectrum? And then what are the steps beyond that? So we talked at the beginning about how you have a patient registry, you analyze the data, you publish an article, but then how do you come out with new guidelines? How do you disperse those guidelines? And how do you ultimately improve the lives of patients and families and encourage healthcare providers and other support networks to basically take those guidelines and work with families and patients? So when we are thinking about moving from syndrome to spectrum, and sort of one of the core things that we found in this article is really that we want to be more encompassing for each of the classic features. So what that means is for Wilms, for the W, it's Wilms tumor, but it's also nephrogenic rests and development of nephrogenic rests. For aniridia, it includes other ocular issues. For the genital urinary anomalies, it includes the kidney system as well, in addition to the GU overall. And then for the range of developmental delays, it includes both severe and mild delays. So how do we promote wellness within the spectrum? Well, we want to think about all the different contributing groups to that spectrum. So patients and families, patient advocacy groups, and then moving both into the medical teams, you have the primary care physician, which can be pediatrics for children or an internist for adults, a specialty home. In the way that we envision this, in the way our clinic runs, it's genetics is sort of the champion for patients with rare diseases like WAGR. And then you have the specialist care teams and then the researchers. And it's really moving and working together to really basically diagnose, treat, and then understand more about all of these different aspects. So it's bringing all of the teams together and basically working both in, and the reason that this is a circle is that things are not, that you can start at any point, at any entry point into this cycle, but all of these groups have to work together in order to promote wellness. So going through some of the specifics from the article, we want to talk about the establishing the diagnosis, assessing the initial health profile, and then what core team is needed, developing a medical home and individualized care plans, focusing on psychosocial development, and looking at care management and screening strategies. So basically, and all of this information is available both on the IWSA website and in the article and in some of the handouts that you've received in your packets, but thinking about the care model and the workup and diagnostic approach. So it's important to establish the correct diagnosis, to basically refer to specialists, to develop the profile, figure out the immediate needs and the clinical features, have the diagnostic workup for molecular testing by the genetics team, and then even without the molecular confirmation, to basically see if a clinical diagnosis can be made and continue to work through the medical issues to develop your baseline assessment and health profile so we can work on and basically establish the care team with the core specialists needed. And then there may be other specialists that not every patient needs, but maybe based on their individual health profile. So once you have that basic information, then you establish the medical home. Who's going to coordinate the care for the patients and family and the primary home? Typically the pediatrician or the internist, and then the specialty home where the care teams to manage issues. Using all of that information, you can create an individualized care plan and then initiate the spectrum screening program, and then figure out if there's other things and other needs that need to happen, and figure out what the follow-up schedule and how often you should be seeing specialists. With the core referrals and the care teams, it's really going to be unique for each patient. And then there's also the psychosocial and developmental support services that are needed, and we need to monitor and refer patients for those, and then provide information for family support through IWSA or other related organizations. For the care management, and the focus really is improving both care at the moment and then the long-term outcomes. And really, we want to basically detect any issues early and then treat those issues as soon as possible to prevent long-term health consequences. And really the strategies here are to basically have your initial health profile, figure out what assessments you need, and then determine that what's based on age and other medical issues, what screening program should be follow-up you should be having. And the real focus here is on kidney health, cardiometabolic health, eye health, and hearing. Basically all things to improve quality of life for patients and their families. One particular area that has a lot of questions, and we really tried to be as clear as possible, is the kidney screening recommendations, with two things in mind. One is the tumor screening, but also kidney health in general, and really trying to come up with a plan over time that families could share with their healthcare providers to try and understand both the current risk at each age, but also what needs to happen to optimize kidney health moving forward. And basically for younger children under the age of 8 years, it's ultrasounds, or so renal ultrasounds every 3 months. At the 8th birthday, you want to do a full abdominal ultrasound and a pelvic ultrasound. And then depending on the health issues, the kidney health issues that have already been identified, either 3 to 6 month follow-ups with ultrasounds of the kidney up until the 15th birthday, and then moving to 6 months based on in conversation with your clinical care team. And then beyond that, basically doing it annually to basically optimize and continue to monitor kidney health over time. So just taking you through and sort of summarizing what we talked about, we really went from patient collected data, analyzing that data, published an article about it, and developed new care guidelines with the hope that moving forward, we've been able to contribute to healthier lives and giving guidelines that families can bring to their healthcare providers to partner together to continue to improve lives for individuals with WAGR spectrum. So what did we do and what's next? So all of the data and the information I've talked about so far came from the WAGR syndrome patient registry. And as I mentioned before, this was patient-reported data, and we were privileged as researchers, among other groups, to characterize and understand rare diseases using this data. The new questions can be added to this registry, and patients can report new aspects of the disease. And then it's another way that researchers can recruit patients into other studies. And keep in mind, this is patient-driven and it's ongoing. So if you haven't signed up or haven't updated your information recently, do that. If you're not sure how, talk to Kelly Trout or Sherry Krantz. I'm sure they'd be happy to help you with that. So the next step that we want to think about, and sort of a different study that's related to this, is to try and, one of the things that was a challenge within the data from the WAGR syndrome patient registry was how to connect the genetic information with the clinical features. So one of the things that we've been doing over the past couple of years for other rare diseases as well is we've developed what we call a growth and epigenetics registry and biorepository. And this is different from the WAGR syndrome patient registry in that we're collecting data from medical records and genetic test results, and we also can collect patient samples. And that allows us to connect things that we find in the patient samples with the data from the medical records. And as part of that, we also can do research-based genetic testing, and we can observe new patterns in the medical records or the testing. And this is really a researcher-patient partnership that we've developed for, like I said, for other rare diseases, and would like to engage and include WAGR spectrum patients and families as well. And I know a number of you have already talked to our team or even shared samples already, and we're happy to talk more about that as the day goes on. So just a brief history of that research effort. So we actually started in August of 2014 as well. And at the time, basically wanted a way to collect clinical information and samples from patients and families. And the rare disorder that I was focused on initially, which is also on chromosome 11 and also can lead to Wilms tumor, is something called Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, and now Spectrum. And as part of that ongoing research, we actually worked with the American Association for Cancer Research to, as part of the first cancer predisposition workshop, where we developed North American cancer screening guidelines for all syndromes that predispose to cancer with Wilms tumor or hepatoblastoma. And the Wilms tumor screening guidelines included WAGR Spectrum at the time as well. We also worked within our patient population to establish specialty clinics and medical homes for Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome. And that led in part to the reclassification of it as a spectrum in 2018 as part of an international collaboration where we had the first care guidelines that were developed as well for that. And basically, we were able to show that clinical features match with certain genetic changes, because there's lots of different genetic changes that I won't get into now that lead to BWS. We also, in 2019, published the first registry cohort and basically developed practical guidelines for many medical issues. The registry includes patients from 49 states and over 28 countries now. And over the past year, we've actually developed on the science lab-based side the first cell-based model of BWS and basically novel mechanisms of disease for BWS, basically using patient samples. And also, and most recently looking at hepatoblastoma, and we're doing the same thing in Wilms tumor, looking at tumor-specific signatures for BWS. Over the past years that this has been active, we've had over 30 publications, both on the clinical research side and in the laboratory. And the goal moving forward in thinking about WAGR Spectrum is basically to engage in a similar way so we can support research moving forward prospectively. And the way this particular registry works is basically we want to basically explain to you what the study is, which I basically just did, and then talk about what it was required to participate in the study. And that's really basically agreeing to be part of it, sharing your information and samples. We study that, and then we look for answers within the data. So a registry and biorepository is a little different from patient-derived information or patient-entered information, because we're actually collecting medical records that include clinical exams and photographs, results from genetic testing, screening, even the images from ultrasounds and things like that. And on the biorepository side, we can collect samples that are usually collected during clinical procedures, such as blood or skin biopsies, or even tissue specimens if there's tumors involved. We also can collect things that are easier to provide, such as saliva. And the goal is really to understand how genetic changes influence growth differences. And that can be used to improve care and outcomes for both better diagnosis, treatments, and improving health and quality of life. It allows us to clarify clinical guidelines that are based in patient-entered information, and to advance our knowledge, and also integrate patient questions into the research. So anybody with a difference in growth, and WAGR Spectrum falls under that as well, and family members can enroll. You don't have to be a patient at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to be part of this. And the information that we look to collect are prenatal records, growth charts, hospital records, family medical history, genetic testing and clinical genetics notes, and any specialty results and records and screening results as well. As part of this, we basically protect your information, because when you join the research, your name is not included. There's a unique code that your family is given, and the immediate members of the research team, such as myself, would know the code and the name, but anything that using this information moving forward is not identified in any way. And there's also privacy protection, both through HIPAA laws, but also through a certificate of confidentiality, which basically prohibits us from sharing your personal information with anything or connecting it to the results that we find. In addition to that, as part of our study is funded by NIH, we actually, and when we publish information, we published in a de-identified way, but we have ways to share that data with the broader community, but it's in a controlled manner typically, such that your name would never be attached to it, but it's controlled in a way that if other researchers want to use the information, they contact us and ask permission and tell us what they're doing with that information, so we can be ensured that the information is not just going anywhere. The benefits are really to increase understanding and improve care and to help patients and families, and the risks are really minimal. It's just those associated with clinical procedures if samples are collected in those situations. It's an ongoing study that basically is trying to understand both what we know now and the long-term effects. And we have the option to update information every 6 months. So if you would like to participate in the study, you need to basically sign a consent form. And to participate, there's lots of different parts that Bill and Andrew, who are in the room, are happy to tell you more about. And then you can share your information, medical records, pictures, or samples. So what are we going to study with this? Basically, we want to look at genotype and phenotype in the WAGR spectrums. And I'll explain exactly what that is in a moment. So what's DNA? So DNA, you can think about, and these are all amazing screenshots from the IWSA website. So DNA is basically the language of who we are. It's the letters that make up the pieces that basically give us all the information that we have. So you can think of it as an alphabet, and then DNA is packaged into genes. And you can think of the genes as a word in a book. So the letters make up the words. And basically the gene is the basic information of DNA instructions, and those instructions are translated so that we could actually make, next slide, books. And the books are the chromosomes. So you basically go from DNA to genes to chromosomes. And the chromosomes is how the DNA information is stored and moved from one cell to the next. And each chromosome has hundreds or even thousands of genes on it. Next slide. And the next step beyond that is all the chromosomes together, which is called the genome. And this is a picture of all the chromosomes. The ones that we're most interested in when thinking about WAGR spectrum is chromosome 11 there, right in the middle. And so, as I said before, the DNA is the letters, the genes are the words, the chromosomes are the book, and then the genome is the entire library. So as we understand that information, we want to focus on particular regions of that. Particularly in WAGR, we want to think about the region on the 11p13 region where there's a couple of genes, and some patients with WAGR spectrum have just deletions that affect WT1 or PAX6. Sometimes BDNF is also deleted. And what we want to understand is how the size of that deletion affects the clinical features. So one of the ways that we're doing that is we have a pilot study that we're working on with the Genetic Diagnostic Lab at the University of Pennsylvania that's expanding something we developed for Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, where we're looking very finely all along the chromosome. And basically you can picture that along the top here where it says chromosome band, you basically have chromosome 11 laid out, and we're going to look at for very small pieces that are missing and figure out exactly what basically the address on the chromosome that's missing for each individual patient that enrolls in the study. And this work being done over at the University of Pennsylvania in collaboration with us will allow us to basically get a more detailed version of the genetic information that's missing. Next slide. And then we can compare that to the clinical features. So by clinical features, we refer to that as a phenotype, which is really a set of observable characteristics in an individual. And it's the result of the interaction of the genotype, so the genetic information, with the environment. And when you think about that connection, you want to think about what a syndrome is. And a syndrome is a group of features or symptoms that are consistently together and basically give you an associated set of symptoms. And children and adults with a syndrome look more like each other than they do like their family members. And it's typically caused by an underlying genetic change or genotype. So what's a spectrum? It's the range of clinical features you see across individuals with a syndrome. And all of these individuals can have the same or similar genetic changes. So for WAGR spectrum, what we would like to see is what genetic changes correspond to what clinical features. And as we're starting to see new clinical features emerge based on the WAGR patient discovery cohort, how does that correlate to the genetic changes that we see? So, and how do we compare these things? Well, we basically need to collect the clinical information and the genetic information. And to do that, we need a registry and a biorepository like the one we've established. And we need to basically get clinical information from lots of patients in addition to the detailed genetic results. Once we have all of those things together, we can look at patterns between the clinical information and the genetic results. So what's next? Well, if you haven't already joined or updated the WAGR syndrome patient registry for patient-reported data, you should do that, because that's how all these emerging things are coming to understand more about the syndrome and the spectrum. You're welcome to join the Growth and Epigenetics Registry and Biorepository at CHOP, and then share medical records and share samples. And as Tom says, you can spit for science. And then you can share your research priorities with WAGR with each other, for WAGR with each other, with researchers, with the IWSA, so we can continue to partner and understand more about WAGR spectrum and other rare diseases. So I'd like to thank patients and their families. I'd like to thank the IWSA and Miranda's Mission for supporting this work, and also Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation for their support of our work. I'd like to thank my team, both those pictured here and the other individuals not pictured. And I'd like to thank you again for listening this morning and for participating in this work and sharing your patients and family stories with us. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Oh, yes, just hold it up, yeah. First, as a reminder, there's a handout in your folder that has the graphics that Dr. Kalish was just talking about, including the care management model, which you'll probably want to take a look at when Linda gives her presentation, and the screening guidelines. So super helpful stuff, and it's in your packet. And it's also on the website. Great question. Jen, were you able to hear that?
No, can you repeat it, please?
Okay, so Carol asked, how is it possible that an individual can have a very large size deletion and have relatively mild features, whereas someone with a smaller deletion might have much milder feature or much more severe features?
It's a great question. And I think the best answer that from what we know now is really, it's not just about the deletion itself. It's about the complex interaction with other genes that may not be on chromosome 11. So it's basically like what the body can tolerate and how that translates into clinical features is something, and which is one of the things we want to study and try and understand, because when we'll start with looking at chromosome 11, but we also realize that there's 23 chromosomes pairs. So there can be complex interactions elsewhere that's affecting that. So it's that you can have this deletion, but because there's a balance in a sense that makes things better, or sometimes can make things more challenging, and it depends on what's missing. And sometimes it's even within the chromosome itself. There's something called epigenetics, where chromosomes, I showed you nice line pictures of chromosomes, but they actually all interact in masses. So there could be the chromosome over here touching this and touching that, and it's those interactions. So sometimes when you miss just a small piece, you're taking out something that is affecting all of those interactions, where if the bigger piece is missing, you actually removed all of the problems also. Does that make sense?
Genetics is way more complicated than we want.
Yes. We've got a lot of work to do.
Is this study looking at all the chromosomes, or are you just focused on chromosome 11?
So we're going to start out in the pilot that a number of you have participated in already, is actually to design a new test for WAGR that's actually basically looking at the technology that we used for a test for BWS to make a better, more sensitive test for that, for starters. But that's the starting point. So we'll focus on 11 first, because it's what we know we need to work on, but then a future direction could be looking beyond that.
Awesome. Other questions? So I have several from online. From Zoom, can we participate from anywhere outside the US?
You can, it's a little more complicated. Like, you can certainly enroll and you can certainly share clinical information. Getting the samples is going to be a little more challenging, and we're happy to partner with you to try and figure that part out. And that just has to do with different international guidelines for sending biological materials. But you're welcome to reach out. And actually the best way to reach us is at this email address on the screen now, bws@chop.edu. That's the research team. And, or you can reach out to the IWSA and they will put you in touch with us.
Excellent. Now you actually answered another question, which was, how do I join the Growth and Epigenetics Registry? Who do I contact?
Yep. So if you're in the room, you're welcome to talk to any of the team members. If you're not, you're welcome to reach out to IWSA or email us at bws@chop.edu.
Perfect. Let's see, one question. My child's records, medical records are all over. How do I gather all of these medical records for you?
Well, thank you for wanting to try and do that for us. What we often do is a two-pronged approach, whereas part of enrolling in the research is you share all of the different, you sign a form for release of medical records, and then you share all of the different institutions where your child has had care. And we will work to try and get some of those records. We found it's most effective if you try and do the same thing. If some of the institutions are part of the EPIC medical record system, sometimes there's sharing options where we actually can see things electronically, but it can be a little challenging. So, but we're happy to partner with you. But we found that basically, if you're in the United States, that two-prong approach helps. Internationally, it's usually easier for families to get records than it is for us to.
Will I receive the results of the genetic testing that you do?
A great question. So part of the consent process is there is a incidental findings form, which means that if we find something in the testing that we're doing on the research side that could affect your child's care, and basically more information about genetics can always affect your child's care or your family, both for family planning or just your larger family, you have the option to decide if you want that information. And the way that works is if we find something that's clinically actionable, we'll work with you and your physicians locally to get the testing repeated. For just the genetic results, if it's done, and most of our testing, once this new test is validated, is done in the in a clinically approved lab, we can share that result eventually. But the one thing I ask for is patience, because developing new tests and doing research testing takes a long time, and also takes funding.
Takes funding, yes. How do we increase research in Africa and South America? I think the concern is that there's not as much research going on in general there. And my answer would be that by participating in this study and publicizing the results, that's very interesting to scientists in other places. More results equals more interest and more participation.
Yeah, and I think the other piece I'd add to that is to put your local physicians in these other areas in touch with us, because we're happy to collaborate and support their research efforts, even if it's just explaining to them how to collect the information in a way that's going to be useful. Because if they, and we've done this for Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, where we have something called the BWS Research Network, where it's not just our institution, but there's individuals at other institutions who participate. So when we publish a paper, it's their data, not just our data. And or if we find something in our data, we ask them to look in their data, and we're trying to create ways to uniformly collect information across everywhere. It's challenging, just like I mentioned before, that there's when you send biological samples, there's rules in different countries. about how clinical information can be and data in general can be shared. So it's always a bit of a negotiation to figure out how to do that in a way that's acceptable to both countries and both institutions. But we're always happy to talk to local folks. And now with all of the virtual capacity, I give talks all over the world on these kinds of things. So we're happy to just basically be zoomed in quite literally to a local institution if they want more information or want to engage or discuss patients in cases.
That's fantastic. And that would apply to the US as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, and you know, the wonderful thing is earlier I talked about collaboration, and this is a perfect example of that. Collaboration for a rare disorder is absolutely critical. We can't have just one researcher over there with their little pile of data and another researcher over there, and they never talk to each other because researcher A has 3 patients and researcher B has 2. We have so few patients, we need everybody to work together. So we really encourage that, and we work with researchers who are also really into collaborating. That's all the questions that I have from online. Any more? Dr. Kalish, are you going to be at the hotel after people come back from the aquarium?
I will be. I'll be sitting in the lobby.
You'll be sitting in the lobby. There she is. Look for this phenomenal person.
Yeah, no, my team will all be here. So feel free. Don't you're not interrupting us. Just please come up and say hello.
Awesome. Oh yeah. So Sherry wants me to remind everyone that the article that she spoke of is online. It's full access, so you can find it through our website. If you want to just look at the whole thing, it's there. The website also has all of these graphics, so you can pull that out too, because the article is long and dense, but this stuff is much more understandable. And there's other resources there, again, about that article that help you understand it.
And there's also some information sheets that I think were handed out locally, and we're happy to share it with you as well.
Yes. So we'll make sure that the folks on Zoom, we'll put that information from CHOP on the IWSA website, wagr.org. And finally, raise your hand if you have already participated in this study. Wow, you guys, awesome. John says that's a lot of spit. That's awesome. Oh, is that another question? See if I can find it.
There you go.
In Germany, we mostly have a focus on aniridia patients, not so much WAGR. Does it make sense to reach out to our WAGR people in our German foundation to collect data as a bulk and send it over to you? Hello to sharing help.
So this goes to those data sharing we were talking about. I think it's great if you want to collect information locally. It would be easier in terms of the data sharing, like individuals can share their data directly with us. If you're going to send bulk data, it's based on the laws of the country. I don't know what the Germany laws are specifically, but I imagine if it's anything like France and some of the other European countries, it's easier if each family enrolls directly with us.
And Steve, I would encourage you that in terms of translation, the WAGR patient registry is not, it's all in English, but we have a workaround to help families who don't speak English to still enroll in that. And I would be delighted to talk to you about it. The CHOP Growth and Epigenetics Registry, I believe you have translators there.
Yeah, we can arrange that. It takes a little logistical planning, but we can certainly arrange to do that. And that's an option also if the families want to get together and do that as like a Zoom call to just talk through everything with oh, thank you for, yeah, so we can share the information about how to contact us, but we're happy to arrange a Zoom with a translator to go through everything in German if that's easier.
Awesome. So Steve says we have our German aniridia meeting next weekend, and I'd like to tell our attending WAGR families about it so they can enroll and share their data.
Amazing.
Great timing, Steve.
Thank you.
Anything else? Beth.
Yeah, and even
There's a video of that
E-
too.
even our even Juliet, our neurotypical kid, ended up needing the assist after I don't know, about 20 minutes of spitting nothing out. So
Remember Leslie saying for 30 years, she's been trying to get Ashley not to spit. Okay,
all right.
anything else? We're good.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kalish.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you
We'll
for
all
having us.
see you later.
She is.
So a couple of quick things in your, while John gets things ready, in your folder, there should be a paper that looks like this. That's a video and photo release form. I know some folks have already filled it out and given it to me. If you haven't, if you wouldn't mind doing that, that's great. So we have your permission to use photos from the weekend on the website or in our communications. And after Linda is going to be speaking about the care management model that was developed as part of the CHOP research and how she's personalized it for her child. After she's finished, we're going to do a group photo with the Zoom folks. And then we're going to do another group photo of everyone who's here in person before lunch. Laura's going to take the picture outside at the entrance. So when we're done here, where everybody can get their kids and do what they need to do and meet us outside. No. Yep, one for her family's fine. So we're really excited to be welcoming Linda. Like we said before, she's from Belgium and our European representative. She's doing great work for us in Europe. And this is her adorable little son, Dylan, and she's gonna tell us how she's used the model.
Hi, everyone. I got to know about the research and the changing the WAGR syndrome into WAGR spectrum a while ago. And I thought this is all great information, but it's very understandable for researchers and people who are in the field, but for families, it's difficult to understand. So I tried to take a look at what is there and see like what the care management model is and the guidelines are, and to personalize it. Like, how does it look like for Dylan? What is an easy way to understand for parents, and how can you use it to probably help your child? So some of the questions I'm going to present in this presentation is why I'm very pleased with the new term WAGR spectrum instead of WAGR syndrome. What challenges did we face in Dylan's care, and how I personalized the new care management model for Dylan. And lastly, why is it important to have a medical professional oversee the care management of your child? So basically, we all know the WAGR acronym. And lots of our specialists and doctors that we meet finally get to know about this too. So when Dylan was born, one of his first features was the genitourinary abnormalities. And after 2 weeks, he was diagnosed with aniridia. We were told, your child has aniridia, and this is part of a syndrome. Dylan was born in Ghana, by the way. So we were told there that we don't know what syndrome or what's going on. We can't do genetic testing. So please take your child to Belgium and try to figure out what's going on. So he was 3 months old when he was finally diagnosed with WAGR syndrome. So he had aniridia, he had the genitourinary abnormalities, and that was the WAGR. So after a few months, he started having lots of pneumonias. He was admitted to the hospital like tons of times. So he had WAGR and his immune system was compromised. Then he started having lots of other like additional conditions and problems. Like he had a hearing loss, he had ENT problems, he did have sleeping problems, feeding issues, low muscle tone, behavioral issues. He was diagnosed with autism, and he had chronic constipation. So specialists were looking at him and saying, oh yes, he has WAGR syndrome, but he has this as well, and he has this as well. The problem was that those specialists were all looking at their own like small problems, not really thinking of it as part of a larger spectrum or syndrome. So linking all of those additional conditions that Dylan had to WAGR syndrome, like we could fill the whole alphabet. I'm sure some of your kids do, like they will get pretty close to having like the whole alphabet. So the challenges that we had was that many additional conditions were known by few specialists, and nobody really took care to look at the whole picture and see what could be done. So I'm very glad that this research came out and that we are moving towards looking at it as a spectrum, which will open doors in the care of our kids. Now, the challenges that we faced was that we had a lot of appointments, we had a lot of hospital stays, I had a lot of information, and there was lots of things going on. So I had a binder with all the reports, like a list of medications that he received, which ones worked, which ones didn't. Information to share, like important information that the IWSA, the one-pagers that were coming out. So I was taking all of this to the hospital appointments. I had like 100 questions at each appointment, and nobody was overseeing all of this. It was just me, and it was super overwhelming. So we did have a pediatrician at first who got us like linked to other specialists. And I thought, okay, we found this person who is really going to take care of us. Well, everything was new for him too, because that was his first WAGR patient. So after a while, we didn't hear from him again. So like, it wasn't new anymore, and it wasn't interesting. So we lost him. Then Dylan had some surgeries, and the urologist was very on top of things. And I thought, okay, well, that will be our next person. But things got really complicated. So she tried to make up excuses on why Dylan should not have the surgery, or she shouldn't perform it. So we didn't hear from her again, and she just moved us to a different person who actually did the surgery. So that didn't work out well too. Then when Dylan started having serious behavioral issues, we tried to get in touch with a psychologist. And I had a meeting with her, and she just said, you know, this is too complicated. I'm not going to take a look at it because, well, I don't know what to do with it. So those were a lot of challenges that we had until we got in touch with the pediatric developmental team at the hospital, and they saw the need to take a look at Dylan's needs and try to like work around it and find a plan. So things started falling into place when Dylan was admitted to like a care center for 3 months for a study. So they started to study his behavior and see what his overall needs were. And they tried to come up with a plan to improve his well-being. So after 3 months, he did really well with the structure and everything. And there were lots of learning opportunities there. So they said, you know, he can stay here and we can take care of all his needs here. So we decided to do that. So he's basically there like 24/7 during the week, gets all his therapies there, has schooling activities, like horse riding, swimming classes, and it's less overwhelming. Now, an additional advantage is that the pediatrician who works at the care center is related to the university hospital, where all Dylan's specialists are. So sometimes a team from the hospital goes to the care center because there are multiple kids with rare conditions. And they bring the team over to see all those kids and do testing there and consultations. So everybody knows his condition. There's lots of good collaboration between the care center and the hospital, and they all know what to be aware of. So I'm grateful that we have this system in place now for Dylan. And a few years ago, I wasn't even dreaming of having something like this. Now, with all this background information, I want to take a look at the care management model. So this is basically the same as you received in your package. So the main goal is to improve the well-being of our kids. So for Dylan, and myself, our support group is the IWSA. We have the private Facebook group for families. We have our website, our one-pagers, our WAGR weekends, our conferences. Those are all areas where we find support. The specialty home and genetics, he had confirmed WAGR through genetic testing at the age of 3 months. His primary care is actually the pediatrician at the multidisciplinary center who works together with all the specialists in the university hospital. And his specialist care team is a lot. It's a urology, ophthalmology, ENT, immune deficiency, orthopedics, multidisciplinary team, and then speech, physical, and occupational therapy. So I thought when I was making this wasn't enough. So I added just 2 additional things. On the left, you find his aids. He has his sunglasses, filtered glasses, hearing aids, his helmet, and his braces. And in addition to all the medical things, he has his stay at the specialty care center, where he receives his schooling, his therapies, and day and night care. So I hope that this is, for me, this was a more easier way to understand the care management model. When I tried to look at how it looks like for my child, everything became more visual. Now, I think we know why it's important to have a medical profession oversee the care management of our children. WAGR spectrum, or WAGR syndrome, is complex, and it's a whole lot more than the acronym says. And someone needs to be your first point of contact, and be aware of your medical history, that whenever you find new symptoms or you face new problems, you have someone to go to who has basically a history of your child and who understands that, well, it is something to take serious, because you're not just coming to them with random questions. Also, as parents, have to deal with a lot. If you have a child with complex medical needs, you have to deal with a lot of things. And we need assistance and guidance, which we find in a professional who is there to support us. Now, going through all of this, I learned a lot. I learned that we are the biggest advocates for our children, and we have to keep going until we can offer them what they need. And it's not an easy road. Well, I already shared some experience last night at the Mother's Night Out. There were some people who shared experience, the worst experience with doctors and what they could tell us. I think we've all been there. But one day we will find people who want to join our team, and together with them, we can build the best possible future for our children. So if you meet people, specialists or anyone who think that you will be too much, those are just not your people. So just keep going until you get to the right people. Thank you.
The model, or when you look at that, do you think, you know, I kind of know where those things are for my child? Keep this model, like Linda did. Put your child in the middle. What are the pieces? And is there something missing? If there's something missing, then, you know,
So anyone who's online, I'm promoting you to a panelist right now. So if you want to pull your video feed up, we always like to take one big picture of everyone here's virtually, and we'll allow you guys to see everyone here at the conference as well.
they'll have to tell me if they can see. Oh, I have to do something else. I'll let Dawn touch it. Kelly should not touch it. I know. Hi, Angie. Okay, wave everybody. Put your videos on, everybody. Put your videos on so we can see you. Hello. See some familiar faces and some new people. Try to figure out who they are. Awesome. Oh, you can unmute yourself and say hello. Oh my goodness.
Hi everyone.
Hi, you guys.
Hey, hi Maria. Say it louder. Hi.
Hi, Tracy.
Can't see the video. Oh.
Oh, here comes more. Hi, Heather. You had really good questions. Hi, Elena. Oh my goodness. Hi, Elena. I owe you an email.
Hello, Maria.
Hi.
Oh, Kalina's there. Hi,
Yeah, I'm here. Good to see you. Hello.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone.
Cindy, hello. Everybody say hi to Cindy. We miss you.
We miss you. I wish we could be there. There. Look at.
Hi, Maylan. Look at you smile. Oh my goodness. Hi, Kat.
Say hi. Hi.
Oh.
Hi. I like to see you, Anna. Okay, here. Hi. There. Hi.
Oh, there's Maria. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Dantas.
Maria is fine today. Maria, come here.
Hi.
Hi, Jen. Can you see all of the takeaways here?
Hello.
Awesome. Look at the baby.
Hello.
Huh? There's a dog in there, I think.
Hello. Hello.
You guys say hi.
Hi.
Hola.
Wow.
You guys say hi.
Oh, look at. Hi, Stella. Stella.
There's what? Come out. Oh, my goodness. Ron, can you? Where are the other folks? Yeah. Oh, there you
You say hi, Didi.
go. Who else is
Hello.
Say hi, Didi. Say hi, Didi.
Hi,
Say
Kara.
hi.
Hi. ¿Cómo? ¿Qué libro es eso?
Hi, Didi.
I forget to move this thing. Hey, Alex. Oh, that's a good one.
There are lots of people.
So much fun. One of the most fun things is putting faces to names. We know so many of these people online and you feel like you just know them so well, but you've never actually met them. And the weird virtual thing, but it's wonderful.
Lena, thanks again for your help this morning.
Nice to see you, Cindy.
Samuel looked precious.
To talk to each other while we.
Love you. Oh, I love you. Love you.
Did you guys hear that? You can unmute yourself and talk to each other.
Yeah, I wrote actually in our group, in our WhatsApp group.
I still lots of people. Yeah.
Go to the next page.
Oh, but like. No, that was your.
There we go. Yara, hi.
Hi, Yara.
Hi.
You saw.
I saw you for a second. Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. Hello.